Yep, we are live. There we go. So, hello, come one, come all, come in general. I am TopNotAnalysis, YouTube reviewer, video essayist, talkie man, and I am active on YouTube, Twitters, and the tickety talks at BOBBASTEFF74. And with me today is Erandor the First. Say hello.
Greetings.
So yeah, today we will be talking about a variety of things, and we've also done some light research on each other's sides as well, so that'll be fun. To summarize the outline of today's agenda, number one, the trap discourse, use and misuse of the term, Nazi as a term, use and misuse, lolly, or as I call it, FBI open up! Ah! And also general prodding, if there's time at the end, general prodding and discussing of essentially trans and gender topics, an introduction for enlightened centrists. So, yeah.
Generally speaking, when we were discussing this topic, I've sort of labelled this topic as the warping of words.
Mm-hmm. So,
one of them being a word I believe is being overly demonized, and the others which I believe are being watered down, or one that's being watered down, and one that's being used to water down another word, which is far worse.
Mm-hmm. So, nice meaty etymology discourse coming on.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess we'll start off with trap. So would you like to?
Let's start with was perhaps the least hellfire of the three, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just a little bit of hellfire as a treat. Would you like to lead on that one?
Okay. So, taking the definition from Know Your Meme, trap, at least in this context, is an internet slang term used to refer to a fictional character whose outward appearance is inconsistent with one's perceived gender. So, to elaborate, or at least to give some context, this is typically brought up in anime. And in anime, there are certain rules for how a character is drawn. The main examples of traps are when it's a male character that is drawn with the styles typically associated with a female character.
Yeah.
So, typically in anime, all characters that are younger all have large Disney eyes, but as they grow up, the male characters typically have eyes typically shrink, whereas female characters typically still have the Disney-like eyes. That is one example of how it's done.
Yeah, and sort of more obviously also just straight up characters that just look more like, or look/dress like, or in a feminine way. Like, the most popular, at least to my knowledge, example of a trap is Astolfo from the Fate series.
I have to feel sorry for anyone who's trying to research history nowadays, because there are so many characters who've just been overrun by their Fate counterparts. Yes, but in general,
and for those of you who don't know, Astolfo is a bloke, like born bloke, identifies as a bloke, but wears all pink and frilly skirts and looks like a girl, basically.
Yes, and that is in its original and I believe proper use, a trap will for a regular trap, it's a male identify. They're a male, identify male, but outwardly appear feminine. And there's a slightly separate term, the reverse trap, where it's a female character, identify as female, but they outwardly appear to be male. In its proper use, in my opinion, none of these characters are ever at all trans. They will always be a cis character. It's just their outward appearance is contrary to their personal identity. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
And also, cross-dressing isn't necessary. It's typically the eye thing is one example. It's just a variety of sort of within the art style rules that they effectively go against. I believe there was an old joke online that the definition was draw a female character, call it a male, is one of the oldest definitions for the term.
See. So, yeah, sorry, I chose a really bad time to have raisins as a snack. 2 seconds.
Yeah, I can continue ranting.
Pretty much that's the gist of it. Like, a trap is or in the traditional sense, a male character who just happens to look like a lady. You know, like the, what was it? What was the song? I've forgotten who sung the song, but don't look like a lady, man, so on.
Be careful there, we don't want to get copyright striked.
Oh.
So yes, generally speaking, the term, at least in my opinion, and mostly the opinions that I see generally considered online, the term should only be applicable to a fictional character.
Yes.
This is one of the main points of contention whether when people try to apply it to real people. The closest equivalent for a real-world example would be the term femboy.
Yeah.
Which I believe some people are also attempting to demonize this term. And I feel they're demonizing it completely wrongly. As I understand some people are trying to misuse these terms
as insults.
As insults.
More specifically, sometimes trap is used as a slur against trans people because the original, I suppose the less informed of trans issues person, they think, oh, a dude who looks like a woman, that's what being trans is, right? And to which I say, no, absolutely not. You know, read some Judith Butler, sir. but yeah, sometimes it's misused that way, and, people should, be more aware of that sort of thing.
And while it's misused in that way, I am not a fan of its misuse. At the same time, I'm also cautious about the other side also demonizing the entire use of the term. I'm not so cautious with the demonizing of the term trap itself because it's only meant to be applied to fictional characters. What I'm more cautious about is the demonizing of the term femboy. Because this applies to real people. This is a term that any man who looks effeminate could use for themselves.
Yeah.
And my main concern is people trying to push so hard for against transphobic things are they themselves are trying to enforce a gender identity on people that don't want that identity applied to them.
Yeah, I mean, like, more generally, like, yeah, I agree. Like, and I mean, anyone trying to force, you know, a gender on other people is bad. And like, you know, like, if people are ironically saying, oh, every dude has to be a femboy, then yeah, that's shitty, because
Well, well,
then,
it's the idea of every femboy must be trans.
okay, then, yeah,
Is
I mean, yeah, that's obviously, like, just a thing you've heard presumably from, like, trans medicalist circles, I'm assuming, because, yeah, like, yeah.
It's more from the hellfire known as Twitter. May that thing burn.
Yeah, like no, like, especially, you know, like, especially with regards to, like, non-binary identities, like, some of which are transgender and some are not, like, you know, like, and like, like, whether you're non-binary, cisgender, whatever, like, you know, you can be a femboy if you like, you know, like, you know, the option is there if you want it, no pressure, you know, like, that would be the perfect world, pretty much. And like, yeah.
It's just my own caution of
Yeah.
I can't.
Although, sorry to interrupt, but like, on a sort of opposite end of the spectrum to that, like, ironically, I've also heard, like, like, TERFs make the complete opposite argument of, why do you have to be trans? Why can't you just be a feminine man? And like, that's, I mean, I could go more in depth into why that's a bad faith argument, but like,
Yeah,
like, there's more than one way to be a jerk about gender, basically.
Yes, there are many ways to skin a cat, all of them horrible.
Extremely. Like, no cat skinning, please.
I would disagree. I despise that concept as much as trying to apply, or I despise the concept of trying to apply the title of femboy onto a trans individual as trying to apply the title of trans onto essentially a effeminate-looking cis male is what what I believe the term femboy should be used for. People have posed
sorry, but like, I mean, like, just to, like, say, like, I mean, I guess you could be a trans femboy if you like, but like, you know, like, I mean, pretty much as far as I'm aware, the only requirement to be a femboy is feminine plus man. So, I mean, surely no matter how you get there, then, yeah.
I mean, yeah, you could probably it require it would require
or maybe more specifically, consciously / deliberately feminine plus man.
Yeah. You could probably extend the. I mean, this will only be a term. This would only apply to them if they wish this term to apply to them.
Yeah.
I think the term could probably be extended to trans males who want to still, in some ways, appear feminine.
Yes.
That could be a extension or slight alteration to the term.
Yeah, sure.
But I believe those two cases are the main uses for the term, in my opinion.
So, yeah, I mean, okay, so, I mean, like, that's the main gist of it, like, this is the word, this is what it means. Sometimes it's used by people who don't know much about the word to say mean stuff, and that should stop. Please use the proper word properly, please.
Yes. Overall, I'm not a fan of the warping of words. In this case, I believe it's taking term. I was going to go back to the tangent I was going to say. People have at points proposed alternate phrases for the same alternate words to mean what...
the same thing.
Yes. The main term I've seen thrown around is flower boy. And firstly, my 2 points with that are, firstly, the word is perfectly usable for its purpose. And secondly, in my semi-outsider perspective, calling someone a flower boy, it seems incredibly insulting.
I mean, I suppose only in the sense that, I mean, flower boy, like, at least to me, kind of has a similar vibe to, like fruity or batty boy, which sometimes, like, sometimes they're not used derogatorily, but sometimes they are, so I can understand the caution behind that. But, but at the same time, like, I mean, the word trap, like, on its own, and, like, why it means what it means, is because, you know, like, trap implies trickery, like, overtly, or, like, which, I mean, in terms of trap characters, they may not necessarily be trying to trick someone, but obviously, from a purely writing perspective, the author is deliberately leading the audience to initially think, oh, that's a lady, and plot twist it's not. So I guess in that sense, the word flower at least has less overtly badly coded meanings than trap in some ways.
Yeah. Well, what I was saying with flower boy, it's not... It's... When I've seen it, it's not people trying to replace the word trap, it's people trying to replace the word femboy.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, then, yeah, no, because, you know, like, femme, you know, feminine, boy, male or boy, you know, like,
yeah.
it does what it says on the tin, like, flower, I suppose flower boy, that sounds more like cottagecore, which is an aesthetic of, so, I mean, you know, not really much need for it, but on its own it doesn't seem horrible, at least.
Yeah. But yes, that was kind of a tangent from the main topic. Myself raising my own concerns on this sort of... because while trap discourse is, I believe, should purely remain surrounding the fictional side, I did want to talk a bit about the real-world counterpart and my own concerns of the happenings with that.
Of course, yeah.
As for going back to the talking about fictional characters, it's the main thing that has brought this topic to a head. I believe it sort of originates when one of the big anime memes subreddits, I think it was the anime subreddit, banned the word trap.
Like recently or a while ago?
This was, I think, nearly half a year ago, and I think they still have that ban in place. But the thing is, they haven't just applied it to the use or people attempting to use it in its proper form, in the form that we're referring to. But people have been banned for using the word trap in the context of the truly traditional meaning of the word, as in they're talking about Dark Souls, and we're talking about stuff like floor traps.
Wow, shit! Wow.
So, I think in this context, I think it's, from my perspective, it's less people actually talking about, or at least within the context of this Reddit subreddit.
Mm-hmm.
It's less people trying to make a point on politics and more just a bunch of people who are particularly power hungry.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, even, like, I mean, yeah, yes, it's bad that they do that, or that, that they outlawed the word to the point of even, like, reducing the number of words that people can use about things. But at the same time, like, it's, like, with all due, no offense intended at all, however, and, like, not to minimize the seriousness of the issue, but at the same time, it's not totally horrible purely on the basis that you can say the word trap in whatever context you want, like, as far as I'm aware, on basically any other online platform or just in general. So yeah, and like also like it's and like also although it is bad that they have a bad rule on Reddit regarding the word trap, at the same time, like, Reddit is owned or run by so and so people, and they have the right to make bad decisions about their app. I mean, just look at Elon. What?
Yeah, it wasn't the whole of Reddit. This is one particular subreddit.
Okay, my bad. Sorry.
I'm referring to one particular subreddit,
Mm.
and yeah, I have to admit this is just one corner of the internet. But I've seen a bit of coverage but the result of that event is what I think has spawned a lot of this discussion. So, just covering what to my knowledge is one of the main events in this. And as much as I'd like to go off on that derail of your mentioning of one Elon, let's continue our actual topics.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. I think I've covered most of what I wanted to particularly mention with the term, but to sort of put a summary to it, I'm of the opinion that the term itself is being wrongly demonized. I've seen while it's quite possible that I have missed many examples of it being used in an insulting form, I haven't encountered many examples of the term trap being used in this case, in the transphobic form. What I've seen more of, or at least in my trawling of the internet, is people trying to effectively demonize the word, make it and it's a pet peeve of mine. When people try to demonize words or symbols, because you're essentially giving your opposition an entire word of the dictionary.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are giving up ground to your enemy. You're not even trying to. It's completely shut down that word in any form of discussion on your side and leaving it completely open to those you oppose for their own use. And I don't want to see another symbol another word that generally is generally meant to be a word that's not meant to be an insult to particular people being ground down and abandoned to the worst of the internet.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I see your point, and I basically on paper agree with what you're with what you're saying on most of it. But like, sinister buts, apologies, but I'm not going to say no, but I'm going to say yes and. So okay, fair enough. In a lot of spaces, trap is being used completely innocently and also in its original form in the slang term. However, at the same time, although as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been any explicit hate crimes relating to the word trap being used to demonize or harm trans people. At the same time, it's more so the the negative connotations of getting trapped and tricked. It's more so the idea of the idea of the semiotics of what trap means in multiple ways being the things that lead to say trans people getting killed in the streets, or getting killed because they can't because their boyfriends can't take their male friends calling them gay for dating a trans woman and that sort of thing. Sort of how even though they may not say she's a trap, they'll say I was tricked and then kill someone. And so and this isn't in a or more so, it's not just in a recent history sort of thing. This goes back to an old I've forgotten exactly when it came out, but the documentary Paris is Burning talked about this in essentially discussing queer European and trans discourse and lifestyle and all that stuff. And also I agree that shutting down an entire word, that gives your enemies a reason to an extra thing to weaponize against you. Yeah, I agree with that, and that's bad. However, sorry, I feel something coming on. I agree that's bad. However, at the same time, even the idea of hanging on to the words doesn't really stop that from happening. A more, I would argue, a more popular example of not rejecting a word, but a word being openly stolen and flagrantly used by your opposing team anyway, is the term woke, which, depending on who's using it and when and where, it can either mean anything that's more progressive than a sandpaper bag, or anything that's more progressive than a sandpaper bag, and therefore I don't like it because it's woke. Because in its original context, I have a couple notes on that. Hang on. Woke originally meant alerting awareness of radical discrimination or racial discrimination, popularized by Black and Afro-American anti-racist speakers, activists, and artists in the 1960s, like Marcus Garvey and William Melvin Kelly, amongst others. So, there you have the word that means a good thing, or at least a relatively neutral thing, and then the bad people, whoever they are, we know who they are, but, or the opposing side, just deciding to fuck with it anyway, and in a way that's, it's sort of obviously that doesn't mean that you should just give up anyway with, not trying to keep the word, but at the same time, this idea of trying to not let your enemies use it isn't really going to stop them from trying anyway. And,
yes.
yeah.
Though I'm not so meaning the enemies, one's enemy seizing ground. It's more your own side going, this completely this completely unrelated word is bad. therefore anyone using it is bad.
Yeah, I mean that's just like general garden variety reductionism, which is obviously bad because nuance is a thing that exists and should be talked about.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then and then from reductionism bad, that's also like I'm really sorry that if I feel like I'm sort of like looping around into spiraling and branching into different things, but it kind of is like a very important aspect of why and how things get used against you in the first place. Like let's say like it's like links on a chain where link 1, the word trap is invented. Link 2, the word trap ends up getting used badly and in a way that it was against its original intent. Trap 3, you try to explain why it's bad. Trap 4, apologies, you end up having to explain how people came to the how people started naturally using the word in a slurred context, and then that basically goes from the word trap, like there's basically like the domino effect between the word trap existing and trying to explain why a lot of it is rooted in transphobia. Like, like it's sort of it's sort of like a butterfly effect type thing. Apologies, but yeah.
Yes. I don't mean to completely derail your thoughts, but another thing that I mean, we talked about this group before during our previous one, but I'll probably go into a bit more my thoughts on them later. But do you want to know who originally made use of this term? And I mean, originally made use of the term in what I describe as the proper meaning of it.
Yeah, go on.
4chan.
Oh yeah, I thought we already said that.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't.
Maybe I am imagining just because I also read the Know Your Meme article and that mentioned.
Yeah, I didn't specifically say it, but
yeah.
They were the ones who originally spawned the term during, I believe it, the Know Your Meme article talks about how it spawned from the Admiral Akbar meme.
Yeah, of it's a trap!
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they were the ones that originated this term as in its internet slang form. And in its, they're the ones who created what I would describe as the proper use of the slang term, which is greatly ironic as well.
Well, ironic in what way? If you don't mind me asking.
Because the whole discourse around the demonizing of the word is the idea that at least the groups associated with 4chan would use the word incorrectly when they were the ones who originally made the word.
Okay. I mean, like again, I'm yes-anding a bit. Like, yeah, I get, okay, maybe it did originate in its correct form on 4chan, but at the same time, like, like the as we've talked before, the polls group of 4chan, which is historically where most of, like, the most well-known crazies are, like the alt-righters and so on, like, those are the people who are most widely known, and therefore it's not outside of, it's not outside the realm of possibility that those guys saw the word trap being used properly and then decided, I can sell this. Like, like it's a very small leap between that and the bad usage, I think.
Yeah. I think at the moment I don't think I have much else to bring forth. Do you have anything else any more notes to make, or because I think this general topic would work well in the future, especially if you're able to bring your transparent into a future podcast.
Or I suppose maybe it would have been better if I had like a femboy friend, but and trans women aren't femboys, so, but still trans and queer voices actually talking about the term, hell yeah, that's good.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I think a very posh-sounding cis white male isn't really the best person to have a full discussion about this.
Like by and large, as long as we're trying our best, you get points for trying. Yeah.
But I think we've got a good way to go into the next term.
Very briefly though, before we do get into it, is doop-a-doop-a-doo. I had two other semi-interesting points.
Sorry for interrupting you there.
Yeah, no, not at all. I was interrupting a bit before. It's chilly. Yeah, doop-a-doop-a-doo. Okay, so I wrote somewhere, one good thing about the trap's term bastardization is that the R-trap's gay discourse, if only because asking questions, whether in good or bad faith, is the root of eventually discoursing your way into the truth, if you fall down the right rabbit hole. Also, ContraPoints did a really interesting video about that on YouTube.
Yeah, I need to actually watch that one. That sounds quite interesting.
Yeah, she's a very interesting character.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, we almost got through this entire topic, my friend, without talking about whether or not traps are gay, and you bring it up at the last second.
Apologies.
We almost got through this, all fine.
Yeah, I mean, in good faith, it could be an interesting thing to talk about, but for the misuse reasons that we discussed earlier, people who are complete psychopaths use it as an excuse to be jerks. So yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a point to pencil in for a future discussion, especially if we can get someone from the especially the T part,
Yeah,
or the L or the G part.
Yeah, definitely, and
because just not to go into a completely different topic, but just to randomly just plonk one of my opinions on is more rights for people is good, but from what I've observed, many of these things brought up but help one group of people is harming another. To help one of the letters openly harms one of the other letters.
Okay.
And merely.
Yeah. So yeah, I would like to have a longer discussion about that, but when the time comes.
When the time comes, we need more people to discuss that one.
Yeah.
And I mean that also goes into whole. That also goes into the hellfire known as TERFs.
Yeah.
And that needs all of that requires a dedicated podcast.
Yeah. I mean, just Alison Bailey, just as a person, just why? Just why? I just want to pick your brain. I just want to know. Jesus Christ, why do you exist? It's like a unicorn, which is ironic for a lot of reasons. But yeah. And also, very briefly before we carry on, I'll also say that, mild disclaimer that, echo chambers and rabbit holes, they are a thing. It is possible for, one person's view of, what's common to, be entirely based on, the chance that they just fell into one algorithm over another, and some people find out more things about other things than others, and, so just take any, sort of broader points, from me or anyone else, just with a pinch of salt, basically.
Yeah, but I should also put a disclaimer on that one. My views have come from observing are typically outsider views on the actual topics, and are quite often formed upon observing the mad ramblings of the more radical parts of various groups. So
yeah, and like, you know, like there's sort of like, would the Overton window be a good metaphor for that?
I don't think the Overton window really applies all that well. I mean, you could.
Yeah, like my understanding of the Overton window is essentially, you know, like first you have center, left, and right, and then as one particular opinion gradually becomes more associated with one extreme, then the Overton window shifts to become the new center. Like that's
the concept being if you you can shift what you what you consider a center by being overly exposed to one side, and if you're only ever exposed to the left side and center right, you would probably slowly shift to thinking center left is the center and center right is the far right.
Yeah.
For one example, it can go the other way as well, and
yeah, and like and like as a more like sort of explicit like people example, I suppose, like, you know, like anti-racism, you know, at first just thinking black people being equal was kind of a radical idea, but then, you know, time happened, civil rights protests, you know, like the rest of history happened, and now it's, you know, right, like pretty much right back in the center of just like a normal thing to believe, and the opposite being obviously bad. So
I think shifting of the Overton window can in many ways is a good thing, but I think when we're talking about people falling into echo chambers and having their Overton windows
like a personal Overton window.
Yeah. The gradual shifts of society's Overton window, I think is good. I think radical shifting in someone's personal Overton window is a bit dangerous. And that's how we get people caught in echo chambers on both sides.
Yeah.
Remember, I am a centrist. So.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, and like, you know, and like it's good to like, you know, pick and choose, like, oh, here's a nice part, here's a bad part, how do we reconcile the things, essentially?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now to go from that whole discussion to our next word.
Was it Nazi?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, this is effectively the opposite of my concerns with the misuse of word trap. In my opinion, and I even believe you are slightly guilty of this as well.
Okay.
By everyone labeling everyone they disagree with as Nazis, they water down the word. Today is Remembrance Sunday. Today is in the UK. Well, on the 11th November is Remembrance Day in the UK. Minute silence at the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month to remember the end of the Great War, the First World War. And the Sunday after Remembrance Day is called Remembrance Sunday. Typically, it will have special church ceremonies at whatever church people are going to. I don't know where I ended up at this tangent.
There was something to do with Nazis there, I swear.
Yes.
Yeah.
And historically speaking, Nazis are a horror unlike any other. And I am especially someone who I consider myself a hobbyist historian, and they is a unique evil in history the German National Socialist or German Workers' Party, and I really don't like the concept of its misuse watering down the horrors they committed.
Mm-hmm.
So much like the previous term, I'm going to provide what I believe is the acceptable use of the term, and due to the nature of this word, I'm also going to go over some other terms I think better represent the groups that better represent those who are typically labelled as Nazis in the modern day.
Mm-hmm.
The term Nazi itself, in my opinion, generally speaking, it's an extinct group. They were I'm referring to the actual group.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that they are the only ones who the term should apply to. Theoretically, if you go to somewhere in Argentina, you can probably find some still living.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from some random closed-in community in Argentina, I don't think you'll find many actual Nazis in the modern day.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the term should, or hopefully, taps on wood, should always remain in the history books. And I hope they never leave those pages ever again. And that's the only time where people ever encounter true Nazis is through documentaries and books.
And,
those,
I'm sorry, but may I interject a bit briefly?
If you can let me cover the alternatives.
Okay then.
It may answer your question already.
Okay then.
In the modern day, there are groups that espouse the same ideology and that carry the same symbolism. That's where the term neo-Nazi comes in.
Mm-hmm.
They carry the same symbolism, they espouse the same beliefs. But very fortunate to everyone, none of these groups, very few of these groups have any actual sway. And that's why, essentially, they lack the power that the originals had. And I believe and also none of them have the sort of direct descendants, direct line from the original group in terms of organization. So I believe that should be the term neo-Nazi is for a group or individuals who espouse the same belief as the originals, but espouse the same belief and carry the same symbolism, but are not the originals. They lack the power, and while they certainly can do horrible things on the small scale to individuals, and I hope no one ever has to deal with that, we're not going to see them bursting through the Ardennes anytime soon. Random historical thing right there.
Yeah.
And I hope I would very much want the second group to also fade away eventually. But again, I don't want anyone to suffer from them. But they aren't the originals. They can't truly. They aren't going to do what. Hopefully, taps on wood again. They will never be able to do what the originals did. The next term. There's a whole series of terms.
But I thought we were just doing Nazi at a time. Or unless you mean like different words for Nazis.
Yes, I'm going for the different terms that I believe should be used instead.
I see.
Neo-Nazi, I believe, is the first of these terms that can be applied to people in the modern day.
Yeah, probably the most common as well, I think, or the most known.
It'll be the most vocal. It's the ones that carry the symbolism of the originals. You may this covers a few of the people in Pole, for example. I mean, some might be trying to use the symbolism to either troll or to do other shit, but this is the first term that I believe could be used. And
sorry, like very very briefly, like as an alternative, I've heard from another YouTuber. I've also heard Diet Nazi suggested.
I like that term.
Or Nazi adjacent useful idiots.
Yes. I actually quite like the term Diet Nazi because it just has that tinge of insult towards them. I think just my 5-second thought on that could probably be used for any
like any vaguely fascist group. That's that's not historically Nazi, but but Nazi in ideology.
Yeah, I'm thinking it probably could be used as a good insult towards towards ones that you encounter online. I would suggest using it towards people who try to carry the symbolism of the originals, because that'll be a good way to piss them off. They will never be their senpai.
Yeah, like like Daddy's not proud of you. You're just wallowing in your own filth, son.
Yes. But the next term, in fact, I'll just list the other terms I think is the better ways of describing those who I typically see labelled as Nazis, especially in the online space. Fascism, reactionaries, and conservatives. The first one, fascists, have similar or the same beliefs.
Not on that note, actually, I have been reading fascism a bit, and like basically fascism is an umbrella term, and Nazi just happens to be like a fascistic flavor, let's say.
Yeah, I'll go into a bit more of that in a moment, but yeah, this is a more expanded term. It refers to sort of similar beliefs or the same beliefs, but I think it should be used when a person is espousing the same beliefs as the originals, but is not carrying the same symbolism. I mean, you've got examples of fascist movements, unfortunately, that still exist, but they're not carrying around swastikas. They're going around with the bundle of sticks that originates from Italy during World War II. There's also the movement over in Greece. I think it was called Gondorn. I don't know if that's still around. It was just something I briefly heard about years ago.
And also I'm slightly hurting some of my own points that I'm going to come up with eventually, but like as another possible term, I've also heard my friend refer to respectable racists or suit and tie ethno-nationalists as like a different example of the Nazis, but X.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that term there.
Respectable purely in terms of aesthetics, like people who are ideologically Nazis but wear a suit and tie and talk all fancy like.
Yes. Now, for the benefit of anyone watching this, I'm going to draw upon the definition of fascism slash third positionism, which is another term for the same thing, from J-Reg, of all people.
Yeah, I've heard a bit of the third position. That I've heard it described as basically fascism for anti-capitalists.
Well, we will get to that in a moment. What you will need to do right now is imagine a cube.
Okay.
Welcome to the political cube. If you look at it from the top, it looks like a political compass. One direction is economic. The other direction is the state. So totalitarian on one side, anarchy on the other. But the angle that people don't usually talk about is cultural. Extreme conservatism on one side, extreme progressivism on the other. So, generally speaking, fascism and third positionism is authoritarian or totalitarian, so extreme statist, and extreme right on the cultural axis. Economically, the term fascism does not define a person's economic beliefs. It just defines them as being authoritarian and right cultural. Whatever point you are on the economic axis determines what flavour of fascism you are. In the centre, ironically, the centrist economic is where the original Nazis were. They had businessmen run the economy, sort of a semi-state run economy, but it was led by businessmen, and they were given tons of slave labour, which is just another horrible thing to attribute to those monsters. You go to the far right economic.
I'm sorry, but I mean then. But in what way is that economic centrism if they had slavery then?
Well, it was sort of semi-state run, semi-capitalistic.
Well,
compared to the others, they are the equivalent of economic centre in that warped form.
So.
Because.
I don't think I follow.
Yeah, we're talking about groups that it's hard to interpret them when they're that warped.
Yeah.
But going to the economic right, you have, I believe he was a Chilean dictator, Pinochet, who was famous for throwing communists out of helicopters.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that one, yeah.
So he was authoritarian, right economic, right cultural. And the other direction, you have, well, the historic term was Strasserism. Strasser being sort of the former leader of the German National Workers' Party prior to Hitler taking over. But the modern term used to refer to a left economic fascist is National Bolshevism. Or the Nazbol.
Okay, that is absolutely no offense intended, but that is vaguely flaring up my spider sense a little bit because in terms of more I say modern, more so 2000 and 2010s level internet political discussions, the theory cultural Marxism was a very big deal, and I remember hearing through the grapevine relating to that, that apparently National Bolshevism was the essentially the precursor to national cultural Bolshevism was. Oh, wait, okay, no, you said National Bolshevism, my bad, sorry. I was mixing it up with cultural Bolshevism, which was the precursor to cultural Marxism, which is a conspiracy theory. It is not Marxism, but yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, the existence of National Bolshevism is actually one of the points people make when they're trying to argue about horseshoe theory.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, because socialism, as a general term, as far as I'm aware, is left economic, left cultural, but is variable on the statist axis. The concept brought forward by Karl Marx in the Communist Manifesto was for a authoritarian version, because one random interesting thing about that era of socialism is the Communist Manifesto wasn't actually speaking against capitalism, because the entire movement was convinced that socialism would eventually triumph no matter what. What the manifesto was actually speaking out about was opposition to the anarchist side of socialism, anarcho-communism, anarcho-syndicalism, anarcho-mutualism. But if you take the extreme authoritarian end of socialism, what you would describe as Stalinism or state communism, what we ended up seeing during Mao, during the Stalin era. But instead of left cultural, you shift it over to right cultural. That's where you get. That's the other way one can arrive at what we call Nazbols.
So, and yeah. So I guess I'm assuming you have other possible Nazi alternatives to refer to people who are ideologically the same but historically not.
Yeah.
But yeah, putting hitting pause on that for a bit. I'll respond now. So, I mean, I get where you're coming from, and I agree that more specific language is good and it should be used more commonly. However, basically, at least in my experience and the experience of a lot of my other friends, the whole "you call anyone you disagree with a Nazi" thing is at least very, very commonly used as a dog whistle to shut down discussion. People will say "you call anyone you disagree with a Nazi" to defend general, more overt bigotry, whether it's sexism, homophobia, etc. And when in actuality, no, we are being very specific in talking about that. And also, I mean, although I don't remember myself in front of you, calling people explicitly Nazi, I have called, some people or figures, racist, sexist, etc. But for the purpose of argument, we'll say, in fact, I actually wrote up, a mini example of this. Let's say, as an example, I said, oh, J.K. Rowling is a Nazi. I don't think I said that, but for hypotheticals, let's say I did.
The internet will clip you anyway.
Yeah. If I said J.K. Rowling is a Nazi, then I would sound ridiculous, which, fair enough, I get how that sounds ridiculous and it's stupid. But the only reason that sounds like "you call everyone you disagree with a Nazi" is because it's lacking context. So, and the sort of general anecdote to lacking context is to be specific about why you're saying that. So, for example, I think J.K. Rowling is a Nazi versus J.K. Rowling receives money from the Heritage Foundation, which is an openly eugenicist organization, and she donates to the LGB Alliance, which wants to outlaw gay marriage, that equals extremely similar to Nazi shit. So, however, it takes a longer time to say that, so therefore, you see what I'm guessing at.
Yes. And I'll be getting on to the term I believe should be applied in that state in a moment. Because, as I've mentioned a few times, all the terms I've referred to so far are authoritarian ideas. And quite often there should be a separate term for those who espouse these concepts, but but don't espouse authoritarian concepts.
So, okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is that, Nazi should only be used, correct me if I'm wrong, you're essentially saying Nazi should only be used for people who both socially align with the Nazis, but also aren't, but also are authoritarian.
It's for those who align on all the ideas, both the cultural axis and the state axis.
So as far as you're concerned, someone can have all of the same similarities as a Nazi. However, if they don't, if they weren't born in 1930 or whatever, or they weren't an official part of the Nazi party back in so-and-so time, then they don't count.
Yeah, in those cases, if they still espouse the same cultural and state beliefs, then the terms fascist or neo-Nazi would apply to them, depending whether or not they carry the same symbolism.
Okay, so
in the case where they espouse the same cultural beliefs, but instead espouse the liberal side of the status axis, then the term reactionary, I believe, should be used.
I disagree there, just because, the whole reason the initial Nazis came to power in the first place was because, or at least a big part of it, I should say, is that they got the opportunity to spread their propaganda and, and generally say a bunch of horrific shit under the guise of, what about our free speech? We're just happy liberals who want to engage in the free marketplace of ideas by radicalizing everyone within earshot. That's based on the extremely liberal sentiment of good and truth will always triumph over evil, and therefore we are the greatest democratic nation, because therefore everyone, every person who agrees on the so-and-sos of whatever legals, the sort of liberal idea of tying good politics to good social outcomes, wherein Hitler was elected democratically. So I would say, in a lot of ways, let's say OG Nazism has a lot of sort of entanglements with aspects of liberalism.
Yeah, unfortunately, they abused that system, and they arose out of a horrific time. Out of monsters arising out of bad times.
Well, bad times, and also Again, I didn't do as much, like, sort of historical research as I probably should have, but essentially, at the end of the day, what was it called? Like, Weimar. Like, the Weimar Republic was,
Yes.
at least as far as I'm aware, very, very progressive and socially liberal, and to the point that, literally a while ago, I got in a little bit of a Facebook spat with an actual neo-Nazi, and I mocked him a bit by poking fun at how, or actually, no, I didn't bring up Magnus Hirschfeld, he brought up Magnus Hirschfeld, and, he was essentially, like, among, like, some of the first major queer studies scientists, essentially. So, they were very much on a way to being, like, very socially progressive, which is my personal, like, end goal of any society. Like, as long as it's socially progressive with, like, freedom of religion, sex, sexuality, etc., etc. And I was going to say something. Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry.
The Weimar Republic, in many ways, was very successful, especially with what they arose out of. They arose out of the the recently fallen German Empire, and they were still saddled with all the war reparations, and they were able to claw their way out of that, all the way to what they were, only to be then hit by the Great Depression. And that's what eventually allowed the originals to claw their way to the top, to the detriment of all.
Yeah. And going back on topic a bit more, another point you mentioned was essentially that, people are using the word Nazi when they should be saying neo-Nazi or diet Nazi or whatever. And personally, at least in my opinion, I think that's a distinction without a difference. Yes, historical Nazis are clearly and obviously different from neo-Nazis, modern Nazis, etc. However, at the same time, there is a useful place for colloquialism in language. For example, every word essentially has a colloquial definition and its common use or different use definition. For example, bitch, colloquially swear word, usually referring to women, etc. Common use or previous definition, just another word for female dog. And so likewise, so in that sense, the colloquial modern use version of Nazis, instead of just straight up saying neo-Nazi, kind of has more in common with itself than the two definitions of bitch do. Or even the two definitions of queer, depending on who you ask.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I think, yeah.
At the end of the day, the goal is the same of identifying here's a thing that's very Nazi-like and why it's important to say that's bad, essentially. Which isn't to say that reductionism is good, but it's not always bad.
Yeah, it can make it easier for people who aren't 4D chess level radical centrists to understand. But at the same time, my main concern with this whole discussion is when everyone's a Nazi, no one's a Nazi.
Yeah,
and the concerns of watering down a term that I believe it has a potency to it and I dread the time when that potency is so watered down that people don't understand why it's such a bad word.
Absolutely no offense intended, but I kind of think that's already happened. Maybe not entirely with the word Nazi, but definitely with the term fascist. In my opinion,
I'm well aware that I'm coming to this political discourse late.
Mm-hmm.
And
fair warning, the only reason I'm as knowledgeable on dog whistles and such is because most of my politics is 5 years late. So yeah.
Yeah. I typically keep myself away from a lot of stuff online. So
yeah.
I'm well aware that the process is well underway with watering down, and in many of the terms I've used is
what things do or don't get watered down isn't really up to us specifically, but it's still good to try, but at the same time, there's still disagreements there.
The main point I wanted to bring up with this is these are my concerns, and here is one possible method of handling these discussions without further watering down the terms.
Yeah.
Instead of calling, just drawing upon the previous discussion we had, the previous podcast, our other guest labelled everyone on 4chan a Nazi.
Well,
and in my opinion,
he did walk that back a bit though, as far as I remember. Yeah. More so, at least from what I remember, his main argument was that Nazis would use the existence of non-Nazis on 4chan as a defense to keep on proliferating their shit, which I think is a very valid criticism.
Yeah, that is a valid point. But what I'm saying is there's other groups that's on there that aren't as vile, and terms like reactionary or conservative would be better to apply to them, especially with some of the content that I watch or read that originate from there. Where there are definitely some hints of right-leaning politics or opinions or dislike of certain left-leaning concepts, but they're not. They're not screaming for the death of people.
Well,
and at the same time, these are the sort of people that could be brought to either the centre or even the left with a nice sit-down and discussion with them. And having the nuance to identify who is in some ways irredeemable and who instead could be could have their opinions altered or are less vile. It's one of the other points I wanted to make. You use the harsher terms for people for your actual enemy.
Well, sorry.
There's terms for groups that might be against you on some points, but you can still persuade them on others or even change their mind.
Well, to that I say, at the same time, it's incredibly difficult to know. Well, yeah, it is incredibly difficult to know whether two or more comments are made by the same person on 4chan. like, you're making that assumption based on the viewpoint that every person who's innocently wrong about one thing but is otherwise center is automatically a different person from the dude who on pole shouting anti-Semitic slurs. Like, and like, again, with the gift of anonymity on that site, you don't even know if entire arguments are just one person stirring the pot. And so, like, even though I do very heavily advocate for the point of, like, politely sitting someone down and say, son, like, I mean, absolutely no offense, but I do have a story to tell you. Like, like, I very much advocate for that. However, there are some, like, spaces where it's incredibly difficult, like, even without the anonymity aspect, it's incredibly difficult to tell apart sincerity. Like, I myself have fallen into that trap a couple times on Facebook of trying to politely make a nuanced point, and then for the other guy to send an entire massive paragraph of stuff with things that I didn't that was the complete opposite of things that I was saying. So, like, obviously it's the sort of troll questions that, where they basically just ask you, like, deceptively simple questions that require a lot of evidence and explanation purely just to be annoying and to waste your time and make you feel bad for not having convinced them well enough. Like,
yeah, I can appreciate that.
yeah.
I mean, general rule of thumb, if you're seeing something completely deranged, it's either going to be a troll or someone who's too far to help.
Well, yeah, but also, like, that's not all that I'm getting at. The other thing I'm getting is that sometimes those people will masquerade as enlightened centrists like yourself, unfortunately. And just to be clear, I don't think that's you. Like, I think you've been very good faith as far as our interactions have been going. But, there are people out there who look, talk, act exactly like you, but will just, like, change one word at the end of their sentence just to be a dick and make you explain yourself more for no reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that tends to, at least in my experience, happen a lot online, and it proliferates more on parts of 4chan because, it's basically the Wild West out there. Like, absolutely no moderation on a lot of it.
Yeah. I think...
Yeah.
I can appreciate what you're making the point on there.
Yeah, and again, like, we do have a lot of the same goals. Like, you advocate for more nuanced, like, specific language. I advocate for more nuanced, specific language. It's just that, it's just that, like, it's just that by the looks of it, like, at least from what I'm getting, is that I seem to have slightly more relaxed views in terms of less, like, essentially thinking that more reductive language can be useful as long as it's provided with an asterisk of context, essentially.
Yeah. So many asterisks.
Yeah. Yeah, like $$ Turixes.
Oh, this is... I'm going completely off the rails here for one moment.
Go on. Floor is yours.
Earlier today, I was watching probably someone going through describing a constructed language they made. That was so... Seraphin, as they called it. A language that requires 7 mouths to speak. And where 4 of those mouths are speaking the various parts of each word simultaneously, and the other 3 are chanting hymns. And depending on which language those hymns are sung in, it affects the tense of the word. I will send you the link. It is and also the words affected by the sort of different light that's emanating from nearby the particular mouth. It's a level of. It's not a cursed conlang. It's a blessed conlang. I'm going to send you the video later. The point I was trying to make is, so sometimes where I have a feeling that if I got my way, discussions on politics would just end up sounding like that Konglan.
Yeah.
And I would admit, I could probably, I could probably go, nuance could probably go a bit too far.
Probably, yeah. Like, which, again, like a little bit of reductionism as a treat, essentially, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, please use less of it, please. Yeah.
Yes, less reductionism.
Yeah.
The best use of it is to get people into this discussion.
Yeah, like, less reductionism, a little bit once in a blue moon, basically.
Yeah, imagine it as the tutorial level to political discourse.
Yeah, the world 1-1 of politics. You have your bricks, you open your brick, it's empty, you do another one, there's some stuff in it, you go to the next brick, there's some stuff in it, even though it's a different type of brick, and now you know that not all bricks are the same, and therefore you are anti-racist now. Cricket sounds. Insert here. Yeah, and... Sorry. Hello?
No, make your point.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think that was most of it, like, besides just that, to share a little bit from my notes, I had you just call everyone you disagree with Nazi argument, fuck that shit up the 2-inch tailpipe. Absolutely no offense, those are my initial thoughts to that argument, but, I have empathy, so, yay. Doop-a-doo-doo. There was one other interesting bit I wanted to get at as well, I guess, the one and only one time, at least in my knowledge, when the word Nazi has been misused, in my opinion, is the Lindsay Ellis drama, essentially, which, to very briefly summarize it almost to the point of absurdity, Lindsay Ellis is a YouTuber who makes left-leaning media analysis videos on movies and TV and stuff. And one day she tweeted out that Raya the Last Dragon is kind of similar to Avatar the Last Airbender, and then people started accusing her of hate crimes. I'm exaggerating, but not by much.
Yeah, but I would say that's the thing I'm most cautious about.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing that I dislike the most.
Yeah, and for me at least, that's less so a problem of people using the word... it is a problem of people using the word Nazi incorrectly, but it's not so much that. I less so blame that. I more so blame, woke scold online leftists in general. The sort of hypersensitive stereotype of, did you just assume my gender? Which then, alt-righters will then try to tell you, oh, every single interaction with a trans or non-binary person when you misgender them is going to be completely shouting down your throats and threatening to kill you, when, as someone who has accidentally misgendered people before, I can, trust me, that is not the case. You're just using a very small sample size to support your point, man. So, yeah. So yeah, I think that's about it in terms of Nazi stuff. Yeah, yeah.
It's really amazing that we were able to get through that whole discussion without, with a civil discussion.
Yeah.
Maybe there's hope for our species.
Yeah, fingers crossed, hopefully. Yeah, and, yeah, what was I going to... Oh, yeah, before we move on to the next, thing of our discourse, did you do the favourite characters homework?
Yes.
Ah!
In terms of...
I'm just going to, like, before we get... I'm just going to, like, build up to it for the highlights bit. So, doop-a-doo-doo-doop-a-doo. And now, we're going to talk about our favourite trap characters. Mild disclaimer, don't use this as an excuse to be transphobic. Off to you, my good man.
I thought we were talking about the, weren't we going to do the Disney villains we wanted to bang?
Oh, I was... the one I suggested in Discord earlier was favourite trap characters, but fuck it, we'll do both. Yeah, whichever you want to do first, I'm easy. Pause.
I mean, with the one that you were bringing up, I can't really say no to the classic two. The classic two being Astolfo and Felix.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of that one actually. Yeah.
Yeah, ReZero. But I find the Astolfo one being more amusing due to how much it's just overtaken the original legends.
Yeah.
Astolfo, he originates from the Matters of France, so the sort of mythological retelling of the Frankish king Charlemagne. And you try to search him, the original tales of the actual character Astolfo have just been completely overrun with the character from Fate, which I feel sorry for anyone studying the Matters of France, because oh boy, you're not going to find what you want.
Yeah, like I can basically picture it now, like like a high schooler trying to look up Astolfo for like his high school history class or something, and then right after he enters search in the Google bar, his mum walks in, and then he just decides to say, "Oh yes, it's porn," because that would be a much simpler version of explaining what actually happened.
Yes, and once again, I've searched up the word Astolfo. The third image is, in the first row, it is all of the fake cat. Actually, no, the third image is actually of the Wikipedia article for the original Matters of France character. My god, I was actually able to find it. But unironically, in the first two lines of the images, we have the fake character in a bunny costume.
Wow. Yeah. So. See.
That's why I find that one hilarious.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah. So for me, in terms of my favourite trap characters, doop-a-doo-doo-doo, just getting up my thingamabob. Oh damn, I guess I forgot to make my notes, so I only have one instead of two, but, Karapika, from Hunter x Hunter. Have you watched Hunter x Hunter?
Myself, how do I spell the name?
Kura.
Found it.
Yeah. Yeah, dude who looks like a girl, yeah.
Yeah. And I'd say that's on the very, looking at these pictures, I'd say this is a good example of the more mild one.
Yeah.
That you can probably...
Yeah, like more androgynous looking than specifically anything else.
Yeah, that's the sort of Well, that's the less overt version.
Yeah, although there is a scene at some point in the early anime where they do like mistake his identity for some reason or other.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know, like you can see either way basically. But yeah, great character. You know, interesting powers, interesting backstory, and yeah, good stuff.
That's a shame that I don't have the time to watch some of the older animes.
Yeah, yeah. Like I mean, like no lie, I actually saw the basically Hunter x Hunter has two versions of itself. One was 99, the other one was 2011, I believe, and I've seen both of them. So yeah. So yeah, so I guess from that to the more interesting one, Disney villains you'd want to bang. The floor is yours.
Yes. I'm going to have to preface this with the fact that I am straight.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of restricted to only the female villains.
Yeah.
Already.
Same, straight gang here.
So I'm going to have to say the queen, the evil queen from Snow White.
I thought you were... I'm sorry, I heard the queen and I thought, oh yeah, she could get it.
I mean, if you go back in time... I mean, I did go to the lying in state. I waited 6 hours in the queue. I was actually very lucky in terms of the wait, but as I was saying, in terms of aesthetics, that's probably the one I see as yeah, that's the one that's the most bangable.
Yeah, probably. You know, a little. You know, she does have them vibes, like as a self-proclaimed switch myself. You know, like she could top me. She could step on me for 9 ways to Sunday, and and also like vaguely related to the other queen as well. Like, highly recommend Philosophy Tube's video wherein she basically talks about how the queen is basically the national state waifu. So yeah.
Yes, that is a term I never wanted to hear. The concept of the late Queen Elizabeth being Britain's favourite waifu. Fortunately, now that concept is now forever driven into my mind.
You are burdened with the curse of knowledge.
But yeah, in some ways, yeah, I can agree where that concept is coming from.
Yeah. Any other Disney villain faves that you'd like to get freaky with?
I'm just I've just got the full list right here.
Yes. Chapter 1.
I'm just looking through them all and go. I mean that of the primary antagonists. If you go to Wikipedia, list of villains, the primary members, the only one I really say is the Evil Queen. Close a far second being Maleficent, but in the original animation, the whole pale blue skin kind of doesn't do it.
Yeah.
The whole almost looking dead kind of it's a bit of a turn off, I must say.
Yeah, you know, like, I ain't trying to stick it into a zombie, please.
Yes, necrophilia would be cringe.
Yeah, extremely so.
Let's quickly just have a look through the rest. I'm currently quickly double checking through the... I mean, the antagonist from The Incredibles 2 was...
Oh yeah, Evelyn Dever. Yeah, she put it on like Big L. You know, and she serves Jamie Lee Curtis vibes, and I like her, so that's nice.
Yeah, I think the two. I think that's the only two I'd say.
Yeah, so for me, fluffing, doop-a-doo-doo, I mean, okay, so oddly enough, apparently The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a Disney film. So I guess that means I get the easy choice of Tilda Swinton for one.
I was not aware it did not list it on this grand list I have right here.
Yeah, and
yeah,
and more generally, Mother Gothel, not bad. You know, like, you know, she could girl boss, gaslight, and gatekeep her way into my heart. Yeah, and I guess going off of memory now, like, who else? I mean, I guess the next closest thing I can think of is less of a twist villain, more of a twist hero, but the Green Mountain God Lady from Moana, I suppose. Tafiti! Haha!
No banging the earth, my friend, no.
I'm sorry, I like a good giant woman. I'm like Steven Universe. Yeah, I like them round. I like them chunky. I like them... Motta likes you.
Going from that discussion to our final words, and once again, like the other words, it isn't just about the word itself, but trying to use it as a central touchstone for a sort of a general thing.
Yeah, and like discussions around it. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, our final word, at least for the time being, is FBI, open up. Lolly.
Yes. And as we've had one word that, in my opinion, is being related to being demonized, and another word that is being related to being watered down. I think this last one is related to both the word itself being demonized and another word being watered down.
Like, because of its use.
Because people are demonizing this word, they are, in my opinion, watering down another word.
Okay, so regale us.
So, bit of cultural context, I think, is required for this discussion. In Japan and much of East Asia, they have different standards for beauty. Unlike the West, which, we know the Western beauty standards.
Yeah.
They lean more towards an individual appearing cute. And while the actual term, ping for somewhere. While the actual term will refer to a character in a fictional character that is underaged. Generally speaking, characters who people try to label it in a certain way because many characters in anime are drawn to be cute because that is just the beauty standards in Japan.
Yeah.
They base their attraction on a different system. And that's why you have many characters who are fully adult but appear younger or appear cuter.
Yeah, like the whole 9,000-year-old dragon god who looks like a 5-year-old, basically.
Yeah, I am unnerved by that as much as anyone else.
Yeah, mood.
But it is more of the less egregious examples, but that people still try to demonize. I've seen even I've seen examples. Actually, I need to hunt down this, but which will take me a moment. But I've seen screenshots from Twitter, effectively, or people trying to associate even basic human interactions with. We're just dancing around the actual term. I believe people are watering down being pedophilia.
Yeah.
It is that term is an actual crime, and my concern is people trying to associate the images of fictional characters with this term is watering down the actual term, which is a legal term and a crime, and watering down an actual the term for an actual crime is dangerous.
So
actually dangerous for a society.
So I mean, correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but like essentially what I'm getting is that lolly refers to like super young looking characters, like regardless of their age, and the use of that as a term makes pedophilia seem less potent as a term.
Well, it's when people try to label.
You mean when people try to label lolly stuff as pedobait, basically?
Yes.
Okay.
Or as CP.
Well, I mean, it is possible for that stuff to be CP in different contexts, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Surely. So I mean, I guess could you give me an example of I mean I don't know if this is an actual example, but I'm going to make up one in the top of my head. Let's say Megumin from Konosuba, someone calls her a lolly and calls that pedobait. Is that the sort of thing that you're trying to get up as the bad thing?
Well, I would sort of the stuff that covers this sort of my main source with how the whole reaction is going on is actually from a YouTube channel that covers various bits of Twitter drama by the name of Rev Says Desu.
Okay.
It's not all his content, but yes. It's I mean, certain things can certainly go to that point, but my main concern is when people start labeling anything that is remotely related to the
showing of super young looking characters as automatically being that, basically.
Yes. For instance, the more recent thing that spawned all the hate and all that is Rebecca from Edge Runner. Edge Runners.
Oh, well, I haven't seen Edge Runners yet, so take what I'm saying with a pinch of salt. Don't get me wrong. I don't think she's pedobait, but at the same time, she is a very young-looking character who is sexualized in some ways. So unless there's some wider symbolic or philosophical reason behind that in the text, then am I wrong?
So the story I've heard actually
as far as I know, she's a young looking character, basically 5 or 6 years old looking android who walks around places wearing an open bikini and a trench coat. Like, so I guess, like, what I'm getting at is that, like, what is, I suppose, for lack of a better term, the, like, what is
the justification
like,
for
like
watch the video. Watch the video that I have sent you. That is Studio Trigger's justification. This is someone from the Cyberpunk team talking about Studio Trigger's justification for Rebecca's existence.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so well, I guess but just for the sake of chat, could you, like, maybe summarize a couple of their main points for why she's sexualized in some ways?
Because it's because they wanted to. Because they just wanted to put the character in. That's the whole reason. There is no special reason why she's in there. Why she's there's no special story reason. It's just that is the way she is.
Well, I mean, okay. I mean, like, okay. Like, yes, and coming at you live. I mean, okay, because they want to, okay, and, and again, that doesn't necessarily make the art bad. However, at the same time, like, wouldn't pedos like that about the show? Like, just, like, I mean, I'm not saying that the artists are pedophiles or anything. However, wouldn't they like that aspect of the show of this super young looking character looking clearly sexualized?
Well, I mean, I'm not one of them, so I can't be sure.
Okay, like, that was probably a bit of a leading question, sorry, but, like, so I guess I'll just flat out say, like, pedophiles will probably like that if they like little Timmy, swinging on the bicycle ramps or whatever, right? Swinging on the bicycle ramps, Jesus Christ. Like, yeah, I mean, sure, I mean, I'm not saying cancel the art. Like, I'm an artist. I'm on the side of art. However, it is worth possibly being cautious of that kind of thing. And I say this as someone whose one of his favorite movies is Leon the Professional, which is, like, extremely heavily implied to be about a guy having feelings for this orphan girl who suffered traumatic backstory. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand, or I can appreciate all that. Yeah, to use the terms we've been learning. My main concern.
Yeah, like, I mean, like basically what I'm getting at is that in terms of people having concerns about Rebecca, like, they may or may not be right, but they are valid concerns, like, purely from a visual level, from what I'm getting.
Yeah, though from what I've heard, people enjoy the character anyway.
Yeah, and like,
no matter what they are. Apparently, Rebecca's a very good character.
Yeah, and and also, like, I mean, like obviously, yeah, like, she could still be a great character no matter what she looks like. However, like, also, like, yes-anding a bit, like, like, it is literally possible to have that sexualization of the character make some sort of wider point, like purely in theory mode here, but, like, it could have been, like, a commentary on, like, the over-sexualization of young people, or in certain societies, like, like, there are ways of doing, there are ways of making the, what's the word, like, there are ways of making the taboo tasteful, or philosophically engaging is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I can agree with that. There's certainly a way to turn this all into a very interesting, nuanced discussion.
Yeah, which I'd argue is basically what we're doing, so, you know.
Yeah. But my true concern is when people are trying to label things beyond, firstly, these are fictional characters.
Well,
but the video I've just sent you is the sort of reactions that have spawned from those who are doing these labels, but have just taken it a step further and trying to label
label the creators as possibly being pedophiles.
Well, that in itself is a horrendous thing. The video I just sent you is going over people trying to label what is essentially accepted relationship dynamics between two adults as pedophilic.
Well, is this like in terms of that example of like two relationships between adults as pedophilic, like, is that another thing about Rebecca? But like, just because okay, like in canon, Rebecca may be like 20 something. However, at the same time, I am slightly wary of Thermian arguments. Like, if this is a Thermian argument,
I'm unsure.
To clarify, Thermian, for anyone who doesn't know, Thermian argument is when people justify something's existence by just pointing to the in-fiction lore as an excuse. For example, when I think it was Goblin Slayer that came out a few years ago, and one of the early first scenes in the show had a sort of erotically framed looking rape scene, and some people were justifying the way that scene was portrayed by saying, well, the goblins are evil, so therefore everything in that scene was completely fine, instead of actually looking at like the cinematic language used at different points.
Yeah, that was an interesting controversy when that happened. But what I'm trying to move on from the original point with Rebecca at this point.
Okay, sorry.
And it's when this is going a bit removed from the discourse around lolly, and more people trying to apply the term pedophilia to things that it's not, and in terms of, and my concerns are people are watering down the actual criminal term.
See.
In their moral crusades or their lack of understanding of basic human interactions.
Okay, I mean, purely going off of the thumbnail from what I can see so far, so essentially, the people who are watering it down are people saying things like, oh, if you like the cute cinnamon roll who gets romantically with the super serious dude, then that's basically, symbolic pedophilia, and even if they're adults, and blah, 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 blah.
It's people trying to label even something as simple as a relationship between two consenting adults, where one of them's an extrovert and one of them's an introvert, and trying to label that situation as pedophilic.
Yeah, then obviously those people are complete basket cases, yes.
Yeah, and admittedly, I am now drawing upon the most extreme case that I've seen evidence for, but Yes, that's sort of the one last thing I wanted to point out about this conversation. So generally speaking, I'm concerned about through the demonizing of the term lolly, people are watering down the term pedophilia because it's a term attributed purely to fictional people, fictional characters, and when we're talking about a term that is a legal term addressing crimes against real people, it's something that needs to be more.
Yeah, like it has to be more like sternly and seriously taken. Which so like on this thing, like I basically fully agree with you there.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the things you mentioned that one can certainly make a full nuanced discussion about this.
Yeah, and like not all like sexualized young characters, like there are ways of doing it that are meant to have a wider point behind it, basically.
Yeah, and that also I went over a quick thing about why anime does portray characters like this.
Yeah, the cuteness thing.
It's because of the divergent sort of beauty standards over in Japan, in East Asia in general.
Yeah,
and quickly touching upon the most egregious example, which we've just talked about. And I think that's all the points I wished to have made for this term.
I guess my notes on this one were a lot shorter just because basically like anecdotal evidence, but my first introduction to the term was through watching there's a YouTuber I like called Giguk, and one of the first series of his that I got into was his top 20 epically awesome anime characters video. And at one point in one of the early stages of that video, there was a character, or no, not a character, but like he made a joke about how one of the characters basically something lolicon, and then I hopped onto the Urban Dictionary to find out what the fluff that was on about, and then I proceeded to bleach my eyes and drink chlorine. Yeah. And
disclaimer: people do not drink chlorine; it will kill you.
Yeah, like, hey, Tide Pod crowd, learn how to differentiate sarcasm, why don't you? You know, and just so you know, that wasn't sarcastic either. Seek help.
For legal purposes, we do not advise people to consume cleaning products.
Yeah, like, please, like, you know, like, anytime someone says it does what it says on the tin, just use it for what it does on the tin and nothing else, please and thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, I believe that was about everything, and so far we've gotten to about 2 hours, about a little over 2 hours so far. So, yeah, I guess to basically summarize our main points, like, trap discourse, it gets misused a lot, and it should be used better, and, you know, not as a slur against trans people. Nazi gets... oh, sorry.
Yes, and that it shouldn't be demonized as much as a term.
Yeah, and specifically its relationship to femboy. Femboy shouldn't be demonized as a linkage to that either. Yeah, and also Nazi, sometimes overused for good reason. Anecdote is basically to mostly try to use more specific and nuanced language instead of calling things Nazi. Otherwise, actual Nazis will unironically say that you're being stupid and make you look stupid just because you didn't explain your point well enough. and Lolly, you know, basically a super young looking anime character, and sometimes extreme vocal crazies on the internet use that as an excuse to claim anything that they personally don't like is lolly or slash paedophilia, even though those are two different things, and one is for a fictional character and the other one is for heinous crime that shouldn't be done. So
Yes.
yeah, like that's the Cliff Notes version of everything, basically.
Yes, I await the FBI to knock on my door.
Yeah, I'll get some cookies and tea ready at the moment. Yeah, so yeah, on that note, like purely because the word trap has a lot of transphobic, like, usage and that sort of thing. We also talked a bit before stream of possibly discussing, like, queer and specifically trans and gender related topics and discourse as sort of a introduction to transgender and transgenders, you know, for enlightened centrists. However, since we're quite deep, you know, like, it's been 2 hours, we're pretty lost in the source, so maybe we should make that its own episode in the future, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I am cool to talk about, like, any other random stuff if you like, but otherwise I'm cool ending here if you want to.
I think I'll end off here.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you for joining us, Erandor, and this has been Erandor and TopNot Analysis. I'm a YouTube video essayist, reviewer, and talkie man on YouTube, Twitter, and the Tickety Talks. Tickety Talks is BOBBASTEFF 74. That's Bobasteph 74. Come one, come all, come in general. Take care now. Bye bye then. Oh, and stream.